Good afternoon out there. Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon. Thank you for braving the elements to be with us today. This is the first of our spring series for What Matters to Me and Why. I'm Vanessa Gomez-Brake, the Associate Dean of Religious Life. The What Matters to Me and Why series offers the Trojan family, that's you, an opportunity to hear from USC faculty, staff, and affiliates in a different way. Rather than lecturing on their area of expertise or their research, which we've heard a lot of from these various people, we in fact invite speakers to share their life journey with us. So once a month, during this Wednesday lunch hour, we get to listen in as they reflect on their values, their beliefs, and their motivations that have helped to shape their lives up until this moment. So, if you would like to nominate a member of the USC community to speak at a future event, please visit our website, that's orl.usc.edu, where you can fill out an anonymous form, or you can also just email me. I'm happy to receive an email from you. On our website, you can also view recordings of our past speakers. And if you're not already on our mailing list, we do have a list at the front door. Please make sure to sign up so that you hear about upcoming events for What Matters to Me and Why and other things we're doing at Religious Life. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight a few upcoming events. As you walked in the door today, you might have seen a few of our flyers. Something I really want to highlight is that next year, the Parkside Apartments will be having a religion and spirituality housing. As you know, we've had a number of housing available for Muslim and Jewish students. We're going to continue to have kosher and halal kitchens available in those individual apartments. However, we're going to create more of a prayerful space as well, a place for exploration where you can learn about other religious traditions, spirituality, and you don't have to be religious to even live in religious and spirituality housing. So I believe residential education has required the deadline for applications for Monday. So if you are a student or you know a student who might be interested in living with other students of these shared interests, please tell them to fill out that online application this week. Over at the University Religious Center, we've launched our movement meditation series on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can do yoga. On Thursdays, you can also do Tai Chi. And on Fridays, you can do a walking meditation around our outdoor labyrinth. So please drop by the Religious Center on any of those days to take part in some movement meditation. Lastly, if you're here on campus, you know that it is USC's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Week. So the Office of Religious Life has partnered with Convergence, a nonprofit, to offer 3 different sessions regarding religious, secular, and spiritual identities on academic campuses. So pick up this flyer and join us. Another free lunch tomorrow, Thursday, somewhere else on campus. I think it's over here somewhere. But just an opportunity to build your skill set around these topics. All right, that's all I've got for event announcements. So please take a moment. It appears we still have sandwiches back there. You're welcome to seconds and thirds. I want to remind you that after today's talk, we will take 10 minutes for Q&A with Bailey, so have your questions ready. We will have a microphone so that we can capture your question on our recording, so please wait to speak until the microphone has reached you. Today, we will be hearing from Bailey London, the Executive Director of USC Hillel. Bailey has been a great partner with our office for the last several years. As such, Dean Varun Soni is here to offer a special introduction. So please join me in welcoming Dean Soni to the stage.
How you all doing today? Good, good. Well, thank you for braving the cold and the rain and the snow for being with us today. It's really nice to have such a good turnout on our first What Matters to Me and Why of the year. For 10 years, I was the host of this event. I really miss it. It's a pretty extraordinary series. It's a national series that happens at different universities, but what makes it so special here is that we do it every month, and we do it based on nominations, and we involve students who generally introduce the speakers. But today, I thought I'd break from tradition and come out of retirement to introduce Bailey London, who is like my little sister on campus. Bailey has been here for 5 years, and I was part of the search committee that brought her here, and it's one of the proudest things, or one of the most, I think, important things, I would say, I've done in my career, was bringing her here. I'll take some of the credit, even though she's done all the work. And that work isn't easy. You know, she revitalized Jewish life on campus over the last 5 years. This university has become a destination university for Jewish students really around the world. And we probably have 4,000 Jewish students on campus now who are part of a vibrant, loving, nurturing, engaged, inspired community here. And it's because of Bailey's extraordinary leadership. She's been in this role for 5 years as the executive director of USC Hillel. It's a bittersweet day for me because she's leaving this role to pursue other opportunities, opportunities of the heart, amongst others. And so we're going to miss her a lot. We're really going to miss her a lot. But I'm really grateful to her on such short notice, to step in and offer us comments today and spend this time with us today. Are there any students from Hillel here today? Any students? For any students at Hillel, spend as much time as you can with Bailey this semester. It'll be the most important thing you do, and you will never forget the transformative impact she will have on your life. And I've seen it with literally hundreds of students. The mentoring that she does, the work that she does, that's work that endures over a lifetime. And so she's planted a lot of seeds here, and those seeds will grow, and I can't wait to see how they grow. It wasn't always easy to lead or nurture Jewish life at USC. We haven't always been the most welcoming campus for Jewish students. All you have to do is ask alums from the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s what their experiences was like. And it's kind of shocking when you hear about the stuff that they had to go through. And so I think doing this work on this campus, where we went from being a place that Jewish students don't come to a place where Jewish students want to come, is an extraordinary turnaround. It's one of the great stories in our recent university history. And Bailey herself, not just as a person, but her own life story really represents this trajectory of USC becoming a welcoming destination for Jewish students. When I first met Bailey, I said, "Bailey London, are we going to the bar to order a drink, or are we hiring someone?" Because that didn't sound like a very Jewish name to me. It sounds like a specialty drink, right? But the more I learned about her story, the more I realized that her name is integral to the work she does here and to the life of this university. Because the reason her last name is London is because of her grandfather, who wanted to come to USC. But at the time, there was a soft sort of Jewish quota that USC had a reputation of really only admitting a certain number of Jewish students every year. So he changed his name to London so he could come to USC. He changed his name to a name that sounded less Jewish so he could attend the university that now Bailey works at. And now Bailey carries this name, the name that was changed, in her work in leading Jewish life on campus. That story of her name is the story of our university, and it's the story of her work here. And it's an extraordinary story of reconciliation and redemption. And you know, it's been, getting a little emotional. It's been really a great pleasure to be able to be on this journey with her over the last 5 years. So you can see how much I care about Bailey, how sad I am to see her go, but also how excited I am to introduce you to her today. So please join me in giving a warm Trojan welcome to our friend and colleague, Bailey London.
Thank you to the whole Office of Religious Life and Dean Soni for that nice introduction. So I'm actually going to start my talk with the story that Varun just shared. He got it very close, but not quite accurate, so I'm going to fill in some of the details for you. My story actually starts 4 generations ago with my great-grandfather, Sam Zavodnik, but really it's his brother. So it's my great-great-grand-uncle, Milton Zavodnik. Sam and Milton moved to Los Angeles with the rest of their family about 100 years ago. They were part of a typical Jewish immigrant family at the time. They settled in Boyle Heights, which is a neighborhood not very far from where we are today. Their father, Aaron Zavodnik, had been a businessman, eventually taking over the business that his father, Israel Zavodnik, had started in the city of Zavod, Lithuania, which is how they got their name. And he had dreams of moving his family to the United States, free from the fear of pogroms and oppression that they were facing because of their religious and cultural background. The Zavodnik kids totally bought into this vision and began their life in America with this same hope for their future. My great-great-uncle Milton was determined to be a doctor. In the early 1920s, he applied to a nearby university to pursue that dream. Unfortunately, he had a familiar experience to modern college students, and he was rejected by the University of Southern California. But as Dean Sony said, it was not because of his academic background. It was because at the time, USC had something called quotas, and only a certain amount of people from specific minority groups were accepted to the university, if at all. Zavodnik was clearly a Jewish name, and he just didn't make it in the quota that year. I know I listed a lot of names of many generations from my family, but I'm going to go all the way back to my great-grandfather's grandfather, Israel Zavodnik, the man who started the family business in Lithuania, and tell you more about his story. We weren't quite sure what he used to peddle, but we know that he did something that took him overseas. We have amazing photos of my great-great-grandfather Israel visiting with his business partners in South Africa and England. The man was clearly well-traveled for the time, and this must have generated a reputation in the town of Zvud as people began to call him the Londoner. Fast forward back to my great-grandfather's brother, who received that terrible rejection letter from USC, potentially blocking him from his academic and professional dreams simply because he was Jewish and carried his identity with him in his beliefs and very recognizably with his name. The family made a quick decision, and everyone wanted to support the youngest child in the family by attempting to assimilate into American society in the pursuit of acceptance to USC. Thinking back to the patriarch of the family, Israel the Londoner Zavodnik, Milton and some of his siblings took on a new name, and they became the London family. He applied again, was accepted, and became a successful urologist. As a young doctor in Los Angeles, one of his first jobs was at the newly opened Mount Sinai Hospital, a Jewish hospital, which was one of the only places he could be employed. It later merged with Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in 1961, creating Cedars-Sinai Hospital, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. This story of anti-Semitism, assimilation, and determination is not unique to my family, but it is the story I think of the most as now a fourth-generation Trojan, responsible for the oversight of the Central Organization for Jewish Life at USC. I often wonder what Milton would think of the fact that 4 generations from his time as a student here would lead to me bearing the name he chose to get in and now serve as the executive director of USC's Hillel. There have been quite a few other Trojans in our family before I enrolled here in 2005 to pursue my master's in social work. But this story of perseverance is one I've always been proud of when people ask about my name, and now it matters to me even more as I lead one of the strongest Jewish communities on college campuses around the world. Which leads me to the first thing I thought of when asked to speak about what matters to me and why. It's community. In the Talmud, a Jewish text, you can find an example of a working definition of the idea of community in Jewish life. A Talmid Haham, a scholar of the Jewish Bible, the Torah, is not allowed to live in a city that does not have the following things: a Beit Din, which is a court of law, a tzedakah fund, which is like a charitable organization, a synagogue or house of worship, a mikveh, a ritual bathhouse, a bathroom, a doctor, a craftsperson, a butcher, and a teacher of children. To me, this text is telling us that in order to thrive, one must live in a complete community with dynamic and interdependent roles for other people to play in your life in order to sustain your basic needs. I find this to be so important in my life. I love that I wake up every day that knowing because of the role I play at USC, there's a dynamic opportunity for Jewish students and their non-Jewish friends to be a part of something larger than themselves, to find meaning in their non-academic college experience, and to both support other people and find support in others that they may be needing. I sometimes have a hard time answering the question, what do you do for a living? Because of how complex the concept of building community seems to be. Sometimes I'm a social worker, sometimes I'm a spiritual leader, sometimes I'm a substitute mom, Sometimes I'm a supervisor to my colleagues. Sometimes I'm a student in a classroom. But I could go on and on. It all comes down to building community, and that's so important to me. This is a value that's been instilled in me since I was a little girl by my parents. I remember bringing coloring books to sit under the boardroom table as both of my parents served on the board of our synagogue, taking on positions of leadership throughout my childhood, and leading the PTO of my elementary school. Volunteering their time and skills, not because it brought them anything, but the outcome of a stronger, sustainable community to be a part of. As a result, I think I've subconsciously pursued opportunities to always be a part of dynamic communities. To this day, my best friends are a group of 4 girls I've been friends with since elementary school. As a teen, I was drawn to the summer camp experience, spending most of my summers in Northern California at Camp Swig and then Camp Newman, making another set of best friendships in the California mountains, and even choosing where to go to college based on where my friends from camp were going. My best college memories are those I made in a small campus leadership organization and the time I spent as a leader of my campus Hillel at the University of Arizona. I then came to USC and Hebrew Union College to study in a small dual master's program, which became my forever community. Crossing the lines between close friendships and professional network, this cohort of now colleagues but forever friends defines the sense of community I have always been seeking in my life. So the next thing I wanted to share when talking about what matters to me is relationships. Again, I look to the Talmud to describe this value. It states, "I have learned much from my teachers, but from my friends more than my teachers." In my case, I'm lucky that many of my teachers have become lifelong friends, so I continue to learn from them too. In Judaism, we are encouraged to study in a chavruta, an Aramaic term for finding a partner to study with. But the root is the same root for the word for friendship. I'm often teased for having so many best friends, and I've been challenged to choose one. I balk in the face of this challenge because all of my best friends have taught me such important lessons in my life. They've each brought richness to my life in ways that the other friends could not have. And in turn, the act of sharing in the lifelong journey of constantly learning together has pushed me to see the world from many different perspectives. As an adult, I continue to pursue this cohort experience to further diversify these perspectives. I feel incredibly lucky to be part of an international network of colleagues. They never cease to impress me in the Hillel International movement. And I'm part of an organization called the Wexner Field Fellowship, which brings together cohorts of Jewish professionals for ongoing professional development and collegial support. These 2 networks have become a source of inspiration and motivation for me, both in my personal and professional lives, helping me recognize further how important it is to me not only to sustain lifelong friendships and relationships, but to seek out new opportunities to make new friends throughout the rest of my adult life. I am going to shift in my storytelling a little bit. I could not think of a transition here, but my next story is also very important. So exactly 6 years ago, almost to the day, something big happened to me. I had a really, really bad breakup. I was living in Florida. My dad had recently had been having serious health issues, and they were back in California, and I was feeling a bit stuck in my job and just feeling like all of this was happening at the same time for a reason, and I needed to make a change. It was a really pivotal moment for me, but I felt like I was living on the pages of a choose-your-own-adventure book. One path had me staying in Florida, a place I had not originally seen as my forever home when I took that first job out of USC, but it had grown to be a wonderful home for me. I had amazing friendships, deep connections to the community I was a part of. I was involved as a volunteer at a fantastic synagogue, felt very close to my rabbi and the families I had surrounded myself with as a community. And the other path felt incredibly risky, but would bring me back to California. This is the path I obviously chose. I set an appointment with my supervisor at the time and explained that my personal life situation had changed and I'd like her support in pursuing opportunities to be closer to my family. I was giving 6 months notice, something I've learned is not common professionally, although you just heard that it's something I've been doing apparently on a regular basis. I did this because I wanted to run towards my next adventure, not away from the problems that I was facing, and I wanted to give myself plenty of time to figure out what that actually meant. I started searching for jobs in either Los Angeles or San Francisco. You learn a lot about yourself in a job search. I had my first job under my belt at this point, and I had stayed there for 6 years, which I felt was long enough to evolve professionally. I changed roles a few times, I stretched and challenged myself, and I learned new skills. I reflected on my own self-discovery that my deepest connection to my personal spiritual identity came through my daily work. Jewish community and communal life is one of the defining elements of being Jewish in my personal life, and I wanted to continue to be a leader in that community and still felt called to do that professionally. I decided to approach my job search with authenticity. As a recently single woman entering the world of dating, I applied the same strategy I was using while dating to my job search. I was going to present myself fully, authentically, and genuinely. I reflected on what I knew I was good at and practiced talking about it with friends who helped give me the confidence to be able to articulate those skills well. I also thought really hard about what I'm not very good at and which of those skills were things I thought I'd never be good at and which were things I wanted to make sure I could practice in my new job to continue to push myself to grow. A recruiter from Hillel International reached out to me after I attended an event they were hosting. I knew from the first 5 minutes of our call that Hillel would be my next professional home. I just didn't know where. She started talking to me about assistant director and development director jobs. I was 29 at the time, had been fundraising and running leadership development programs in my past position, and I felt that those jobs would be a great next step. And then the USC job was posted. They called me because I was an alumna, and they thought the hiring committee might be interested in the fact that I went to school here. I quickly spiraled down the rabbit hole of facing imposter syndrome. Do they know that the job on my resume is not my most recent job, but my only job? Do they know how young I am? Do they know anything about me? Clearly not. But I remembered my dating strategy. If I saw potential, I'd go on a first date. I'd present myself genuinely and authentically. And if it wasn't a match, it wasn't meant to be. I remember the first round of interviews was a phone call with one of the chairs of the search committee. I nervously paced around my home while we spoke for over an hour that felt like 5 minutes. Then came 2 rounds of Skype interviews. I was honest and forthcoming about why I loved Hillel as a college student and what I was nervous about with this responsibility. I was flown out and met with the search committee and students. Halfway through my interview, I remembered I was actually being interviewed. The conversation was so easy, so full of joy, and so much excitement. I knew I wanted this job. I knew that the board of directors and colleagues from the university and the local Jewish Federation would be there to teach me anything I didn't know yet. And I knew the jump from my previous role would be a big one, but I was excited by that, and I could already feel the adrenaline pumping with the challenges that would bring. And I was right. I remember that first year, walking across campus to a meeting with university administration and looking up at this big blue sky with wisps of clouds poking up behind Bovard, thinking, I can't believe I work here. I was confident that this was my forever job. Don't get me wrong. Not every day has been blue skies and walks in the metaphorical park of USC's campus. But I will say, even my worst days have brought meaning to my life, and that matters to me the most. Whether it was going to the mikveh, the ritual bath, as one of our students chose to join the Jewish community, or intervening in a serious mental health crisis and staying with a student as our organization helped connect them with the resources they needed to stay safe and healthy, or straining to stay awake and watching the faces of 40 students who would not have had the opportunity to travel to Israel without our birthright trip as our bus arrives in Jerusalem. My job has definitely had days of PR crisis and cleanup, but it has mostly been filled with moments of knowing that I have played a part in building a community that has provided meaning and support for others. And now, 6 years after quitting my job in Florida, I've created a life that brought me closer to my parents and brother. I found fulfillment in my career in ways I never could have imagined, and I've fallen in love. This love created a new challenge in my life. I'm going to get emotional. That required I reflect on what matters to me again. I've had an incredible 12 years of pursuing my career with very little in my way. My colleagues often reflect on the extra challenges presented to the few women in the executive director role of Hillel's at large universities. I'm proud to have faced those challenges with determination and what I see as success. I also seem to have overcome my issues with imposter syndrome and still manage to feel a bit scared and overwhelmed by my work, but in a way that's humbling and inspiring. I've built beautiful relationships with our board members, donors, Hillel colleagues, students, and university colleagues, and can proudly say that this is an incredible team of professional and volunteer leadership, and our organization is in great hands. With all of that in mind, as Varun shared, I've announced my resignation as the executive director of Hillel and will be leaving the organization I love so much in May to move to San Diego to start the next phase of my life with my boyfriend. This decision was not like my choose your own adventure in Florida. This was a decision that forced me to reflect on my personal life and my professional life and figure out a way to balance what matters most to me in both realms. I can say this was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and I recognize the privilege that comes along with that reality. I love USC Hillel and the students, staff, board members, and community colleagues who've grown to feel like family. But I also love Josh and have dreams of creating my own family soon. The unfortunate reality for me is that the two things I love the most do not exist in the same city. And so I figured out a way to stay connected to Hillel, and I'll continue next year as a consultant to help create a legacy, ensuring the strength of the organization for many years into the future. But I'll be living in San Diego, where I get to pursue my personal dreams that bring a greater sense of balance and love to my life. So when reflecting on what matters to me and why, I think ultimately it all comes down to surrounding myself with wonderful people who I'm constantly learning from and making sure I'm always in pursuit of making the world a better place through the communities that I'm a part of. Thank you. Any questions? It's okay if there's a question. Oh, there's a question in the back.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
My question is, you mentioned kind of some of the challenges of being like a young woman in professional leadership. What do you think would be your recommendation, or how did you start to believe in yourself or reconcile some of those doubts as you grew in your career?
It's a great question. I grew up in a feminist household, and I have to admit that I didn't realize those challenges had to do with being a young woman until afterwards I was reflecting on the challenges and realized that there was outside influence based on the fact that I was a young woman, and I was naive to the fact that it was affecting me professionally. It was a bit of a culture shock for me. I grew up in a bubble where my brother and I both had the same opportunities my whole life. It wasn't a household where the boy had a later curfew than the girl. Everything was pretty equitable for us. And there were no opportunities that I felt I didn't have access to because of my gender or my age. And so when things started to get blocked for me because I have a high-pitched voice, or because I cry when I'm emotional, or whatever the stereotypes are, that was the first time, it was my adulthood, that it was the first time that I realized I was a part of that issue also. I think part of what helped me navigate it was how naive I was. And I was able to just push through and not realize that it was a barrier until I looked back and realized that what I thought was just genuine effort was harder than what my colleagues had to face. And I think by staying focused and not letting that perspective get in my way, I was able to ignore it and push through and say it's not an issue for me because I'm not going to let it be an issue.
Hi, Bailey. This is
Hi.
Vanessa again. So as you know, I graduated from Arizona State University.
I'll forgive you.
Yeah. And while I was studying religion, you were studying Judaic Studies.
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
So I'm just curious because, as most people know, I'm a humanist, and yet I was really intensely interested in religious life and community life. But I'm wondering, what did your college life look like? And was there, other than the academic pursuit of Judaic Studies, how did it play out in your personal life?
That's a good question. When I grew up in a very small rural community outside of San Luis Obispo, which is funny that I consider San Luis Obispo the big town that I grew up outside of, because it is itself very small. And we drove 25 miles to get to our synagogue when we wanted to go to it. I did not have any Jewish friends growing up. And our rabbi identified my interest in Jewish history through my involvement with the synagogue. And he was the one who suggested I go to summer camp, which was a Jewish camp, and that's where I met my first Jewish friends. I was clearly influenced to choose which college I wanted to go to because 10 of my friends from camp were going there. And that stood out to me now as an adult, looking back on my decision-making process as I was seeking Jewish community. I chose to be a Judaic Studies major because I knew I wanted to do the dual master's program at USC in partnership with Hebrew Union College, and I thought it would position me to get into that program. U of A Press seems to also publish a lot of Jewish history text, and so I thought, well, I'll go where the textbooks are printed. I don't know why I thought that was important. And my college experience was really interesting because very quickly my camp friends became those go-to friends I knew would always be in my life, and so I didn't have to put as much effort into making space with them once I was there. And my Hillel experience was the first time I saw what we call in the Jewish community pluralism, where it was not just a Reformed Jewish synagogue, but there were a long list of other denominations represented in one organization. I met my first Orthodox Jew at Hillel. I learned that the prayers I said at camp before and after a meal were the short versions. And there's really a long version that I didn't know before I went to college. And so in the classroom, I really learned Jewish history and theology. But in my Hillel was where I really understood how diverse Jewish practice can be. And I really found beauty in being different. And I felt Hillel was a very safe place for me to just be curious. And everybody accepted what I did and didn't know and answered all of my questions and gave me opportunities to lead in a way I had not led before. And college was that time where I really found confidence in not knowing things and in being able to ask questions Jewishly.
Hello.
Hello.
So my question is, you mentioned that you took a big jump career professionally from your Florida job to the job here. And as someone that is also considering a job hunt, what advice do you have when maybe applying for something that you maybe not be as qualified for, being worried about the other candidates' qualifications? So I guess, how do you make yourself confident when jumping for your next step?
It's a great question. My first thought was I feel uniquely positioned because I'm working for a board of directors who's incredibly supportive and invested in my professional growth. But I realized that that's actually not a privilege. It should be a requirement when you're looking for a job, and a boss is somebody who you can feel confident telling them what you don't know how to do and what you're nervous about. And instead of their answer being, well, then you're not qualified for the job, if it's a teachable skill, it should be, what efforts are you willing to take to learn those skills? And just like I really think job searching is like dating, and you want to interview them as much as they're interviewing you and make sure you're going to get the training and the skill development and the support and the flexibility and whatever else is criteria that you find important in that job, because if you're not searching for a lateral move, you want your next job to be a place where you grow and help you achieve your goals in the future. Anyone? All right. Thank you all for, one more? Okay.
So on behalf of the Office of Religious Life, we have just a small token
Aw,
for you,
thank
Bailey, so
you.
you can continue to document what matters to you and why.
Thank you.
I imagine there will be more gifts for you in the future because you've played such an important role to religious life at USC. So please join me in thanking Bailey for sharing her story with us today.
Thank you.